So something changed after 2016, right? It was a year that felt like the end of one era and then the start of one that did not hit the same. My friends feel it, the internet agrees. So today I'm going to answer a question that I've been asking for a long time. What was it about 2016 specifically that was so special? And what changed? And while making this video, I was reminded of an important lesson, so I'm going to touch on that at the end, but let's just get right into it. And before I get into what I think is the main cause behind why we look back at 2016 specifically, first we got to just take a moment to appreciate where the culture was back then, right? Because it for sure plays a role in this. And I want to start with music because this one makes me smile, man. I have one word: SoundCloud. Every single day we had a new anthem, a new artist, a new style. It was like for the first time the record labels had lost control of what people were listening to, and it was beautiful, right? And as a huge fan of rap music, this felt like the top. Hip-hop was becoming the number one genre right in front of my eyes. And, nearly 10 years later, I'm still listening to these songs that came out in 2016, right? There were so many new sounds emerging all at once. It was just beautiful to watch. The 2016 XXL freestyle, I swear, could be taught in schools one day. And I'll never forget, like, the reception when it came out. People didn't like it. It was so new and it was defined as mumble rap. But holy shit, how the tides have turned looking back, right? And now it's one of the most iconic freestyles ever created, I can't even put into words how this makes me feel, right? I can say with confidence 2016 alongside 2017 was the peak of rap music for my generation, right? For the younger generation. And I still listen to rap all the time, but I just feel like that innovation, that novelty that we witnessed back then is gone, man. And, I don't know what was in the air. I think the bar was just so much higher in terms of competition and, SoundCloud just for the first time allowing artists to reach us directly. It was just a special time, man. I remember Uzi was just starting to put the game in a chokehold. We had X coming up, Kodak, Joey Badass, Kanye on top of all this innovation drops Life of Pablo. I could go on and on. It was just a special time for rap and music as a whole. I think it just felt like real art at this time still. And I wrote out a whole video on the decline of rap, but for now, let's just call it how it was and move on. It was goated. So next, I think we can all agree video games have taken a massive hit, the past few years. I know there's definitely some exceptions, but for the most part, we're declining, right? And I think in 2016, that decline had sort of begun, right? But it wasn't until Fortnite hit the streets the next year that gaming would really change forever. Battle passes, games as a service, the whole early access slop that we're all used to now. We used to just buy finished games. Making this video, I Googled games that dropped in 2016. I was kind of surprised. Like, nothing really crazy was out. I know, like, there was, like, Uncharted dropped that year, Doom, Battlefield. Those were, like, the top games when I Googled it. But my friends and I, we were playing, like, just, I think, Black Ops 3, like 2K, like sports games, it was like pretty average games, but I just feel like gaming as a whole still had this authenticity back then, that it was about to lose in the coming years. No battle royales yet, no Travis Scott concerts, we were just staying up till 2 a.m. for the love of the game. And look, like, obviously I loved Fortnite when it came out, but it changed the way games are not just played but developed, and we're still paying the price for that fucking game today. So 2016, it was about to really drop, but it hadn't yet, right? And we had Pokemon Go, which is funny looking back. Like, it was this fun little game. We got the whole world outside playing the same game, which was sick. And somehow this formula hasn't been replicated or built upon since then, which sucks because that was awesome. Like, all these people, all these demographics, all playing the same game outside. Like, that, I think at the time we didn't realize that was not going to happen again. You know what I mean? And just looking back now, it's also just hard to believe that there was a game that encouraged people to actually go outside, right? And, compared to now, COVID, it's like everything feels like they want us to be inside, indoor maxing, right? So, and then we can't talk about the culture without talking about, where sports was at. I feel like sports was hitting different back then too, and this is from a New Yorker. My teams were ass at this time, but it was still insane. And we saw the Cubs win the World Series for the first time in over 100 years. And, the Cavs came back and beat that fucking Warriors team that I hated. So that was, cherry on the top was just sports. And then next I want to talk about where YouTube was at. Because, in my opinion, the content on YouTube was so much better back then, right? The Mr. Beast structure had yet to become the norm. Maximizing retention and stimulation, that wasn't the priority, what comes to mind to me is like FaZe Cut Comms, Chris Smooth, like H3 when he was funny, and it felt like around this time was right the cutoff where YouTubers were still allowed to say whatever they wanted, right? We're about to enter a terrible zone where, I can't even get into it, but it was the last unfiltered year, I feel like, on the internet for reasons I will get to soon. But what else wasn't the norm was podcasts. And look, over the years I've definitely enjoyed my fair share of podcasts. But I think now we have to put tariffs on podcast equipment because it's like, holy shit, everyone's got one, right? People are just talking to talk. And what it's done is it's caused small talk to reach the internet, as if, us dealing with it in real life wasn't annoying enough and hard enough. And, I don't know, I feel like people used to have shit to say when they would make YouTube videos. And now with podcasts and even streaming, there's just way more slop out there. There's way more people saying nothing, but it's getting consumed. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with podcasts. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with live streaming. I actually want to look into maybe starting to stream, but it's undoubtedly had an effect on like the just amount of small talk content, we'll call it, that's around now. So now I want to get into my theory, right? And I'm actually proud of this because I did some research here, and I feel like I know the actual cause of why 2016 felt like the last of an era, right? So we all obviously had social media. It had just become the norm, and we were still eating it up, and it still felt like this new tool that was just making us connected. It was fun. And, the negative consequences, the comparison, the FOMO, the unrealistic expectations, all that had started to emerge, but it was subtle still, right? It could be avoided. The real difference is that the algorithms hadn't been tuned to perfection yet, right? Brain rot didn't exist yet. We were all consuming more or less the same content, meaning that we were all on the same page in a way, and it was a much less intense page, right? Think Harambe, think Mannequin Challenge, Damn Daniel. The internet at this point was a shared experience. And, posts were shown to you based on when they were posted and if they were posted by someone you follow. So, coincidentally, in 2016, Instagram made the switch to show posts based on what it thought you would engage with the most, and quickly after, engagement and, profits went up, other sites followed, and it was clipped then, all of a sudden the internet knew us better than we knew ourselves, and without even realizing it, we just adapted, and now here we are, right, in 2025. The algorithms are so invasive, like you can't even type some shit out on your phone or talk about something out loud without it finding its way to your feed. And this is what's been separating people into these hyper specific little echo chambers, right? It's not a coincidence that people are at each other's throats all the time now. We've been completely divided and having our own beliefs consistently reinforced, right, instead of challenged. And it's going to keep getting worse and worse as the algorithm gets, stronger and stronger. It's literally math, right? So the internet is no longer a shared experience like it was in 2016, right? It's a catered one. And this is why things feel much different now. And then, I did want to, it wouldn't be a Pauly Walnuts video if I didn't, trauma dump some personal story of mine. So I did want to, just kind of paint a picture where I was at in 2016, because I think that plays a role as well to why I personally view it this way. I was around 16 in 2016, and this is when I had just started dipping my toes in degeneracy, right? It's that age where you start going to parties and you start seeing like, oh, this feels good, this kind of goes crazy, right? Similar to what happened with social media and algorithms, it's like the consequences didn't exist yet. I could worry about the negative side effects of drugs and things like that when I got older. And also between the Juul and the weed pens, it was like the industrial revolution for degenerates, right? It couldn't have been timed better for me being 16 years old, right? I'd be lying if I said that this wasn't part of the reason that I look back at 2016 with those rose lenses and this nostalgic, feeling. There's something deep about nostalgia, right? And I know this. Like, there's a reason I use these classic Call of Duty gameplays in the background of my videos, right? It's comforting. It's comforting to think back on simpler, happy times. But I think, making this video, it's also important to remember that the brain tends to only store the good stuff. And as you can tell, I feel strongly about 2016. I really love 2016, but I had to remind myself that this was far from a perfect year for me personally, right? A friend of mine passed away in 2016, and instead of dealing with those feelings, I turned to numbing myself, right? Because I was just a kid. I didn't know how to process shit, right? And this ended up being a year I became completely addicted to nicotine, right? And that's an addiction that I would carry for years and years. And same with weed. Like, this is when I became reliant on these two substances specifically, right? It's also when I started getting these walkie migraines every single day. That I didn't know at the time was the beginning of something a lot worse and a lot more serious that I would find out in the future. But yeah, like, nostalgia kind of tries to trick us, and it can make us think that the best days are behind us, when in reality, a few years from now, we'll be nostalgic probably over this very year. Everything goes back to enjoying the present moment, because our brains have this tendency to just take for granted the present, and then all of a sudden 5 years down the line we'll be like, I wish I enjoyed where I was at in life at that time more, whether that's with your family, your friends. It's just something to keep in mind, is that nostalgia is great, right? It's comforting, but can also be a little bit of a bitch. So yeah, that's it for this video. I really enjoyed making this video. I put a lot of thought into this one. I hope it translates. Thank you guys for all the love, and I will talk to you later. Peace.